The great hall of the Kelvor High Council stretched upward like the inside of a cathedral. Pillars of black stone rose hundreds of meters into the darkness above. Thousands of Kelvor officials filled the viewing galleries, their scaled faces turned toward the center of the chamber where the real power gathered. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood alone on the speaking platform. She was a small woman by any standard, barely reaching the chest of the smallest Kelvor guard. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple style. Her dark eyes moved slowly across the assembled crowd, taking in every detail. She had been doing this work for 30 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had negotiated with species that could crush a human with one hand. None of it showed on her face. She simply waited, her hands folded in front of her, as calm as still water. The Kelvor High Council sat on raised platforms, arranged in a half circle before her. 7 of them, each ruling over dozens of star systems. Each one had conquered their way to power through blood and fire. At the center sat Supreme Hegemon Draxton, the most powerful being in this arm of the galaxy. Draxton was massive even for a Kelvor. His scales were deep purple, a sign of royal blood. His eyes glowed with a faint orange light, a feature of his species that grew brighter with strong emotion. Right now they burned like small suns. He held the treaty document in his clawed hand. 50 pages of careful negotiation. 2 years of work, everything humanity had asked for was reasonable. Trade access, mutual defense agreements, recognition of human territorial claims, basic things that any spacefaring civilization might request. Draxton did not even pretend to read it. "You come before us again," he said. His voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Year after year, you come with your papers and your words. You ask for things as if you were our equals." Elena's expression did not change. "We ask only for fair treatment, Supreme Hegemon. Nothing more." "Fair treatment." Draxton let out a sound that might have been a laugh. The council members joined in. The sound filled the chamber like the growling of beasts. "You control 12 systems. 12. We have ruled 200 for 3,000 years. What makes you think you deserve fairness?" "We believe all sentient species deserve basic respect," Elena said. Her voice remained steady and clear. "Respect is earned through strength," Draxton said. "Your species has been among the stars for less than a century. You have no great fleets, no conquered territories, no legacy of victory. You are nothing." Elena said nothing. She simply watched him with those dark, patient eyes. This seemed to anger Draxton more than any words could have. He rose from his seat, his massive form casting a shadow across the entire platform. He lifted the treaty document high above his head. "This is what we think of your requests," he said. He tore the document in half. Then he tore it again, and again. Pieces of paper fell like snow around Elena's feet. The crowd roared with approval. Some of them stomped their feet against the floor, creating a sound like an earthquake. Elena watched the paper fall. She did not move to pick it up. She did not flinch. She simply waited for the noise to die down. "Furthermore," Draxton continued, his voice rising with excitement, "the High Council has reached a decision regarding humanity's status in this galaxy." He gestured to one of the council members who activated a holographic display. A map appeared in the air above them, showing human space as a tiny blue cluster surrounded by the vast red territory of the hegemony. Effective immediately, all human systems are declared subject territories of the Kelvor hegemony. Your people will serve us, as all lesser species serve us. Your resources belong to us. Your labor belongs to us. Your future belongs to us. The crowd erupted again. This time the celebration was even louder. 3,000 years of conquest had taught the Kelvor that this was how the universe worked. The strong took, the weak served. It had always been this way. Elena let them celebrate. She let the noise wash over her like a wave against rock. When it finally began to fade, she spoke. "May I ask a question, Supreme Hegemon?" Draxton smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "You may ask your last question as a free human. Is this truly your decision? The decision of this entire council? You choose war with humanity?" More laughter. Draxton spread his arms wide, a gesture of absolute confidence. "War? There will be no war. Your species will simply submit, as all species submit to the hegemony. What could 12 systems do against 200? What could your tiny fleet do against our armada? You speak of war as if you could fight one. I need a clear answer, Elena said. Her voice had not changed, but something in it made a few of the council members shift in their seats. You are choosing conflict. You are choosing to attack us. You understand this? We are choosing to take what is rightfully ours, Draxton said, as we have always done, as we will always do. Elena nodded slowly. She looked at each council member in turn, meeting their eyes. Some of them looked away. Most did not. They had conquered too many worlds to feel shame. Then she looked back at Draxton. You want battle, she said. Her voice was quiet now, but somehow it carried through the entire chamber. Every word was clear. Every word was ice. Then watch your worlds burn. For a moment, there was silence. Complete and total silence. Even Draxton seemed frozen, uncertain how to respond to such a statement from such a small creature. Then the laughter started again. It began with one council member and spread like fire. Soon the entire chamber was shaking with it. The idea that humanity could threaten the hegemony was the funniest thing any of them had ever heard. Elena turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the vast space. She did not hurry. She did not look back. She moved with the same calm she had shown throughout the entire meeting. Run back to your little worlds, human, Draxton called after her. Enjoy your last days of freedom. Our fleets will arrive within the month. Elena paused at the doorway. She turned her head slightly, just enough to speak over her shoulder. Your fleets will never reach us, she said, and when this is over, you will understand what you have done. Then she was gone. The celebration continued for hours. Wine flowed. Speeches were made about the glory of the hegemony and the foolishness of lesser species who did not know their place. No one gave a second thought to the small human woman and her empty threats, except for one. Council member Vexari sat in her seat long after the others had left. She was young for a council member, having inherited her position only a decade ago. She had seen the look in the human's eyes. She had heard something in that quiet voice that the others had missed. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was not desperation. It was certainty. Vexari felt a chill run down her spine. She told herself she was being foolish. Humanity was nothing. Everyone knew that. The reports all said the same thing. Primitive technology, small population, no military to speak of. They were farmers and traders and dreamers. They wrote poetry and made music and talked endlessly about peace. So why did she feel like something terrible had just begun? Far above the planet, Elena's shuttle docked with a human transport ship. She walked through the corridors in silence, her guards falling in behind her. No one spoke. No one needed to. She reached the communications center and dismissed everyone except her most trusted aide, a young man named David Chen, who had served her for 15 years. Send the message, she said. David's hands trembled slightly as he worked the controls. Are you sure, Ambassador? Once we do this, there's no going back. There was never any going back, Elena said. We tried for 80 years. We gave them every chance. They made their choice. She watched as David entered the encryption codes. Watched as he typed the 2 words that would change everything. Prometheus Protocol. The message traveled at faster than light speeds, bouncing through relay stations that officially did not exist, reaching destinations that appeared on no map. It arrived at military installations hidden in asteroid belts, at research facilities buried in the hearts of dead moons, at shipyards floating in the darkness between stars. And everywhere it arrived, people who had waited their entire lives for this moment began to move. Elena sat down in a chair by the viewport and looked out at the stars. So many stars, so many worlds, so many lives that would be affected by what came next. Ambassador, David said, the hegemony is already mobilizing their fleet. They're not waiting. They want to crush us quickly. I know, Elena said. Let them come. Our visible defenses won't hold for a day against that force. Our visible defenses aren't meant to hold, Elena said. They're meant to give the hegemony one last chance to turn back. One final moment when they could choose differently. And if they don't turn back? Elena closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they held a sadness deeper than any ocean. Then they will learn why humanity hid its true face from the galaxy for 80 years. They will learn what we are capable of, and they will learn that we took no joy in any of it. The ship jumped to FTL, carrying them toward home. Behind them, the Kelvor hegemony prepared its mighty fleet for what it believed would be an easy conquest. They had no idea what was coming, no idea at all. Admiral James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, looking at a star map that no one outside of humanity's highest command had ever seen. The map showed human space as everyone knew it: 12 systems, 23 inhabited worlds, a small blue dot in a vast red sea. But the map also showed something else: hidden military installations marked in gold, secret shipyards marked in silver, research stations marked in white. There were hundreds of them, scattered across the galaxy in places no one would ever think to look. 80 years of preparation, 80 years of hiding, 80 years of hoping that this day would never come. It had come anyway. "Admiral," said Commander Sarah Park, his second in command, "all fleet elements report ready. The Prometheus protocol is fully active." James nodded slowly. He was 62 years old, with gray in his short hair and lines on his dark face that spoke of decades of service. He had trained for this moment since he was 18. His father had trained for it. His grandfather had helped design the very ships that now waited in the darkness. 3 generations of his family had prayed they would never have to use what they had built. "How long until the hegemony fleet reaches our border systems?" he asked. 47 hours, sir." "And our people?" "Evacuation is proceeding. The outer colonies will be empty within 20 hours. Everyone is moving to the protected sectors." James turned away from the map. Through the viewport, he could see the fleet. Not the small defense force that humanity showed to the galaxy. The real fleet. Ships that had been hiding in deep space for decades, waiting for a signal that finally came. There were over 2,000 of them. Each one was centuries ahead of anything the hegemony possessed. Stealth systems that made them invisible to any known sensor. Weapons that could crack planets. Shields that could withstand a sun going nova. Humanity had watched the galaxy for 80 years. They had studied every species, learned every technology, and improved upon all of it. They had seen how the Kelvor treated conquered peoples. They had seen the slave worlds, the mass executions, the systematic destruction of cultures and histories. They had decided very quietly that this would never happen to Earth. "Launch the Shadow Wings," James said. "Begin Phase 1. Across the fleet, small ships detached from their carriers. These were the Shadows, crewed by men and women who had volunteered for the most dangerous work. They would slip into hegemony space ahead of the main fleet. They would prepare the way. The Shadows had been in place for years, actually. Sleeper agents living on hegemony worlds, engineers working in shipyards, scientists in research facilities, soldiers serving in the very army that now marched against humanity. All of them human, all of them waiting. The signals went out, and the waiting ended. On Kelvor Prime, a maintenance worker in the central communications hub removed a small device from his pocket. He had carried it for 12 years, waiting for the activation code. Now he placed it against a wall, pressed a button, and walked away. 15 minutes later, the primary military communication network went dark. On a shipyard above Thraxis 7, a welding team working on the newest hegemony battleship received a message on frequencies the Kelvor didn't know existed. That night, subtle changes were made to the ship's navigation computer. Nothing that would be noticed during standard checks. Everything that would matter when the ship tried to fight. On 17 different worlds, power plants experienced unexplained failures. Weapon manufacturing facilities suffered accidents. Military supply depots burned. None of this looked coordinated. It all looked like bad luck. Equipment failure. Human error, the Kelvor joked, not knowing how right they were. By the time the hegemony fleet reached human space, they had already lost their ability to communicate quickly. Their newest ships were sabotaged, and their supply lines were starting to crumble. They didn't know any of this yet. They still believed they were flying to an easy victory. The hegemony armada was a sight that would have terrified any normal species. 1,500 warships, the pride of 3,000 years of conquest. Millions of soldiers ready to claim new territory for their masters. Fleet Commander Korath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Domination, watching the human border grow closer on his displays. He was a veteran of 30 campaigns. He had never lost a battle. He did not expect to lose this one. "Commander," one of his officers said, "we're detecting human ships ahead. A defensive formation." Korath looked at the display and laughed. "That's their defense? 40 ships? This will be over before dinner." The human ships were small, outdated things. The kind of vessels a species might build if they had only been in space for a few decades. They formed a thin line between the hegemony fleet and the nearest human colony. "Open a channel," Korath said. "Let me speak to them before we destroy them." The face that appeared on his screen belonged to a human woman, young, with red hair and freckles. She looked impossibly calm for someone facing 1,500 warships with 40. "Human Commander," Korath said, "I am Fleet Commander Korath of the Kelvor Hegemony. You have one chance to surrender. Lower your shields and prepare to be boarded. Your people will serve the hegemony as subjects. This is better than death." The woman smiled. It was not a nervous smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something he didn't. "Fleet Commander," she said, "my name is Captain Lisa Wong. I appreciate the offer, but I'm afraid I have to decline." "Then you will die," Korath said. "All of you. Your little ships cannot stand against us for more than minutes." "You're probably right about that," Captain Wong said. "These ships are pretty old. We don't really expect them to last long." Something in her voice made Korath pause. "Then why do you fight?" "We're not here to fight you, Commander. We're here to give you one last chance. Turn around. Go home. Tell your leaders that humanity does not want war. We never wanted war. If you leave now, no one else needs to die." Korath stared at her for a long moment. Then he started laughing. His bridge crew joined in. The idea that 40 ships could threaten 1,500 was the most absurd thing any of them had ever heard. "Your courage is noted," Korath said. "It will be remembered after you're dead. All ships, open fire." 1,500 warships unleashed their weapons at once. Space itself seemed to burn. The 40 human defenders vanished in a wall of fire that could have cracked a moon. Korath nodded with satisfaction. "Move through the debris field. We continue to the colony." "Commander," one of his officers said, "I'm detecting something strange." "What?" "The debris field. There's no debris." Korath turned to look at the display. The officer was right. Where 40 destroyed ships should have left wreckage, there was nothing. Empty space. "What happened to them?" he demanded. "Where did they go?" "I don't know, sir. They just vanished." "Ships don't just vanish. Run a full sensor sweep." The sweep took 30 seconds. When the results came in, Korath felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Fear. The 40 human ships appeared on the display again. They had moved. They were now behind the hegemony fleet, completely undamaged. "How is that possible?" Korath whispered. Before anyone could answer, the space around them changed. Ships appeared from nowhere. Hundreds of them, thousands of them. They materialized out of empty space as if they had been invisible, surrounding the hegemony fleet like wolves around a wounded animal. These were not the small, primitive vessels Korath had expected. These ships were massive, sleek, covered in weapon systems he couldn't even identify. Each one radiated more power than his entire fleet combined. "Commander," his sensor officer said, his voice shaking, I'm counting. I'm counting over 2,000 human warships. Their technology. Sir, our weapons can't penetrate their shields. We can't even target them properly. They're jamming everything." Admiral Okonkwo's face appeared on every screen in the hegemony fleet. "Fleet Commander Korath," he said. His voice was calm and sad. "My name is Admiral James Okonkwo, United Human Defense Force. You have entered human space with hostile intent. You were warned. You were given a chance to leave." Korath could not speak. His throat had closed with terror. "Your weapons cannot harm us," Okonkwo continued. "Your shields cannot protect you. Your communications with your homeworld have been severed. You are alone out here, Commander. Alone with us." On the bridge of the Domination, panic was spreading. Officers shouted conflicting orders. Some ships tried to run. Others opened fire blindly. The human fleet did not move. They simply waited. "I am not a cruel man," Okonkwo said. "I take no pleasure in what happens next. But your leaders made a choice, and now your people will pay for it. Tell your crew to abandon ship. We will spare those who surrender. Those who continue to fight will die. You have 5 minutes to decide." The transmission ended. Korath looked around at his bridge crew. He saw their fear. He saw some of them already moving toward the escape pods. He thought about his mate at home, his children, his grandchildren. He thought about all the worlds he had conquered, all the peoples he had enslaved, all the lives he had ended without a second thought. And he knew with perfect clarity that what was happening to him now was exactly what he had done to others. "Abandon ship," he said quietly. "All hands, abandon ship." Across the hegemony fleet, the same scene played out on ship after ship. Some commanders refused to surrender and died in balls of fire that lasted less than seconds. Most saw the hopelessness of their situation and chose to live. Within an hour, the greatest military force the hegemony had ever assembled was gone. Some ships destroyed, most captured. Every escape pod collected by human rescue vessels. Not a single human ship had been scratched. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Okonkwo watched the captured hegemony officers being processed. They would be treated well, fed, given medical care, eventually returned to their people. "Phase 1 complete," Commander Park reported. "The invasion fleet is neutralized. Our losses are 0. James nodded. He should have felt triumph. Instead, he felt only sorrow. "Begin Phase 2, he said. "It's time to take the war to them." The human fleet turned toward hegemony space. 2,000 ships carrying the righteous anger of a species that had wanted nothing but peace. They had tried for 80 years. Now they would teach the galaxy what happened when humanity was forced to fight. The flames rose 3 kilometers into the sky above Thraxis 7. The largest military shipyard in the Kelvor hegemony burned with a fire so bright it could be seen from orbit. Ships that had taken years to build melted like ice in summer. Weapons meant to conquer worlds became slag and ash. Council member Vexari stood at her window and watched the destruction. She had flown here 2 days ago to inspect the shipyard. Now she watched everything burn. A junior officer burst into her room. His scales had turned pale gray with fear. "Council member, we've lost contact with the orbital defense stations. All of them. Something destroyed them in minutes." "Human ships?" Vexari asked. Her voice was calm, but her hearts were pounding. "We don't know, council member. We never saw them. There was no warning. They just appeared and destroyed everything. Then they vanished again." Vexari turned back to the window. Somewhere out there, human warships moved through the darkness, invisible, unstoppable. They struck without warning and disappeared before anyone could respond. This had been happening across the hegemony for 2 months now. In the first week, 14 military bases were destroyed. In the second week, the number rose to 30. By the end of the first month, the hegemony had lost more military assets than in any war in their 3,000-year history. The humans were not invading. They were not conquering. They were simply erasing everything the Kelvor had built to make war. Shipyards burned, weapons factories exploded, training facilities were reduced to craters. Fuel storage depots vanished in balls of nuclear fire. Every piece of military infrastructure was a target. No defense could stop them. No force could catch them. And through it all, the humans made one thing absolutely clear. Civilians were not targets. When they struck the shipyards above Malthas III, they gave workers 3 hours to evacuate first. When they destroyed the weapons factory on Corvin Prime, they disabled the building systems and waited until everyone had left before the bombs fell. When they eliminated the fuel depots on a dozen worlds, their precision was so perfect that homes just across the road were left untouched. This was not random destruction. This was surgery. The message was clear. We could kill all of you if we wanted to. We are choosing not to. Remember this. Vexari had spent the last month studying everything she could find about humans. Old reports from First Contact, trade agreements, cultural observations. She had watched their entertainment, read their literature, listened to their music. What she found frightened her more than their weapons. Humans were not the simple, peaceful farmers the hegemony had believed them to be. They were predators who had learned to hide their teeth. Their history was filled with violence, wars that killed millions, weapons that could end worlds. They had fought each other for thousands of years before they ever reached the stars. And then somehow they had stopped. They had looked at what they were capable of and decided to be something else. They had channeled their predator instincts into building instead of destroying. They had created art and science and philosophy. They had chosen peace. But the predator was still there, hiding, waiting. The hegemony had woken it up. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Okonkwo reviewed the latest reports. His fleet had been operating in hegemony space for 8 weeks now. They had destroyed over 1,000 military targets. They had killed enemy soldiers who refused to surrender. They had done terrible, necessary things. Not once had they targeted a civilian population. Not once had they destroyed a hospital, a school, a home. They could have. The technology existed. The opportunity was always there. James had forbidden it. "Admiral," Commander Park said, "we've received another surrender offer from the Hegemony High Council." "What do they want?" "They're offering to return our original territorial claims and sign a non-aggression pact. They ask only that we stop the attacks." James laughed quietly. It was not a happy sound. 2 months ago, they were going to enslave our entire species. Now they want to go back to how things were. Shall I compose a response? Tell them no. Our terms haven't changed. Complete military disarmament, release of all subject species, formation of a cooperative galactic government, nothing less. They'll refuse. I know, and so we continue. James walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the hegemony was falling apart. Their subject species had seen their masters losing. Rebellions were spreading like wildfire. Worlds that had been conquered centuries ago were demanding freedom. It was happening faster than anyone had expected. The hegemony's power had always been built on fear. They had convinced the galaxy that they were unbeatable. Now that the illusion was broken, everything was crumbling. "Admiral," another officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface of Kelvor Prime. It's on an open channel. Someone wants to talk." "The High Council?" "No, sir. It appears to be a civilian broadcast. Someone named Thexvarn. He claims to be a historian." James raised an eyebrow. "Put it through." The face that appeared on the screen belonged to an old Kelvor. His scales were faded with age, and his eyes had lost their glow. He looked tired and sad. "Human Admiral," the historian said, "I do not know if you will hear this message. I do not know if you care what one old scholar has to say, but I feel I must speak." James said nothing. He simply listened. 3,000 years ago, my people were not conquerors. We were farmers, like your people. We grew food. We raised families. We told stories under the stars. Then we discovered we were not alone in the universe. And we discovered that the universe was full of species who wanted to destroy us. The old historian paused, gathering his thoughts. "We fought back. We had to. But somewhere along the way, we forgot why we were fighting. Defense became attack. Protection became conquest. We became the very thing we had feared. We became monsters." His voice cracked with emotion. "I have spent my life studying our history. I know what we have done to other species. The Vrethshi, who we hunted to extinction. The Maltharian Union, whose entire civilization we erased. Dozens of cultures destroyed because they were different. Because they were weak. Because we could." He looked directly at the camera. "I do not ask for mercy, Human Admiral. We do not deserve it. I only ask that you do not become what we became. Your power is greater than ours ever was. The temptation to use it will be strong. Do not give in. Do not let our sins become yours." The transmission ended. James stood in silence for a long moment. The bridge crew waited, uncertain what to say. "Commander Park," James finally said, "begin preparations for the final phase. We're going to Kelvor Prime." "Sir, the High Council hasn't surrendered. They will. Or they won't. Either way, this ends now." The human fleet assembled for the final jump. 2,000 warships carrying the power to destroy worlds. They had used that power carefully, surgically, precisely. They had been the weapon they needed to be. Now it was time to see if they could be something more. On Kelvor Prime, Draxton received the news that the human fleet was coming. For the first time in his life, the Supreme Hegemon had no idea what to do. His military was shattered. His shipyards were ash. His communications were unreliable. His subject species were in open rebellion. The empire he had inherited was falling apart around him. Supreme Hegemon, one of his advisors said, we must prepare the civilian population for evacuation. If the humans attack the planet directly, they won't, Draxton said. He had been watching. He had seen how the humans fought. Precise, controlled, never touching what they didn't need to touch. How can you be certain? Because they are not like us, Draxton said, and for the first time, he began to understand what that meant. The human fleet arrived in orbit around Kelvor Prime 3 days later. The orbital defense platforms that should have protected the planet were gone, destroyed weeks ago. The military bases on the moons were silent craters. The mighty homeworld of the hegemony lay open and defenseless. The humans did not fire a single shot. Instead, they waited. On the surface, billions of Kelvor watched the sky and waited for death. They had seen what had happened to other species who resisted the hegemony. They expected the same treatment now. The death never came. Instead, a single shuttle descended through the atmosphere. It landed in the central plaza of the capital city, surrounded by crowds who had gathered to watch the end of their world. The door opened. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stepped out into the light of an alien sun. Beside her walked Admiral James Okonkwo. They were escorted by 4 human soldiers, but the soldiers kept their weapons lowered. Elena looked at the crowd. She saw their fear. She saw their hatred. She saw their confusion. She walked toward the High Council chambers without a word. The Kelvor parted before her like water before a ship. No one tried to stop her. No one dared. At the great doors of the council chamber, she paused. She turned to look at the crowd one more time. We did not want this, she said. Her voice was quiet, but in the silence everyone heard her. We never wanted this. You chose this. Remember that? When you look at the ashes, remember that we gave you every chance to choose differently. Then she turned and walked inside. The galaxy held its breath. What happened next would determine the future of 100 species across 1,000 worlds. And it all depended on what one small human woman would say to the rulers of a dying empire. The High Council chamber was silent. The galleries that had once held thousands of cheering officials were empty. The great pillars of black stone rose into darkness that seemed deeper than before. The only light came from a few emergency panels and the faint glow of the council members' eyes. Supreme Hegemon Draxton sat on his throne. He looked smaller than Elena remembered. The confidence that had filled him 3 months ago was gone. His scales had lost their shine. His eyes barely flickered. The other council members sat in their places, but they did not look like rulers anymore. They looked like survivors waiting to learn their fate. Elena walked to the center of the chamber and stopped. Admiral Okonkwo stood slightly behind her. Their 4 guards remained at the entrance, watching but not threatening. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched out like a living thing. You came, Draxton finally said. His voice was hoarse. I thought you would simply destroy us from orbit. Is that what you would have done? Elena asked. Draxton closed his eyes. Yes, it is exactly what we would have done. What we have done many times before. That is the difference between us, Supreme Hegemon. Draxton leaned forward. His eyes searched her face, looking for something he could understand. Why are you here? What do you want? Territory? Resources? Slaves? Tell me your price and we will pay it. Elena shook her head slowly. You still don't understand. Then explain it to me. Draxton's voice cracked with desperation. I have ruled this hegemony for 40 years. I have conquered 11 species. I have negotiated with the most cunning minds in the galaxy. I always understood what my enemies wanted. But you make no sense to me. Elena took a step closer to him. Her eyes never left his. 3 months ago, in this very chamber, you tore up a treaty that asked for nothing more than fair treatment. You declared our species your property. You laughed at the idea that we might resist. Draxton said nothing. He remembered. You gave us no choice. You forced us to show what we were capable of. And now you have seen it. You have seen your fleets destroyed, your shipyards burning, your empire crumbling. You have watched helplessly as everything you built to make war was reduced to ashes. She paused, letting her words sink in. We could have done so much more. We could have destroyed your cities, killed your civilians, hunted your species to extinction the way you hunted the Vrethshi. We have the power. You know this now. Then why didn't you? One of the other council members asked. His name was Corthan, and he had ruled over the subject species of the outer territories. He had personally ordered the deaths of millions. Elena turned to look at him. Because that is not who we are. And because becoming like you would be a greater defeat than any battle. She turned back to Draxton. Supreme Hegemon, I am going to tell you our terms. They are not negotiable. You will accept them, or we will continue our campaign until there is nothing left of your military capability. Either way, the result will be the same. The only question is how many more of your people die before you accept the inevitable. Draxton straightened slightly. What are your terms? First, the Kelvor hegemony will disarm completely. Your warships will be decommissioned. Your weapons factories will close permanently. You will maintain only what is necessary for planetary defense and disaster response. Murmurs ran through the council. Complete disarmament was unthinkable. It would leave them defenseless. Second, all subject species currently under hegemony control will be granted immediate independence. They will choose their own governments. They will control their own resources. The Kelvor will have no authority over them. More murmurs. The council members looked at each other with something like horror. The subject species represented most of the hegemony's wealth and labor. Third, a new galactic cooperative will be formed. All species, including the Kelvor, will have equal representation. No single power will dominate. Decisions will be made together through diplomacy and consensus. Elena paused. The chamber was absolutely still. In exchange for these concessions, humanity offers the following. We will help rebuild what we destroyed. Our technology and resources will be shared with all member species of the cooperative, and we will guarantee the safety of the Kelvor people. No one will take revenge for what your empire has done. The cycle of conquest and retaliation will end here. Draxthon stared at her. His mouth opened and closed several times before he could speak. You would protect us after what we tried to do to you? Yes. Why? What possible reason could you have to show mercy to your enemies? Admiral Okonkwo spoke for the first time. His voice was deep and quiet, carrying the weight of everything he had seen and done. Because we are not you, we never wanted to prove we could destroy you. We wanted to prove you could not destroy us. There is a difference. He took a step forward, standing beside Elena. Our species has a long history, Supreme Hegemon, longer than you know. We have fought wars that make your conquests look small. We have built weapons that could crack planets. We have done terrible things to each other, things we can never forget. His eyes met Draxton's. But we learned. Slowly, painfully, we learned that strength without wisdom leads to ruin, that power without mercy creates only more enemies, that the cycle of violence has no end unless someone chooses to break it. He gestured at the empty chamber around them. You built an empire on fear, fear of your weapons, fear of your armies, fear of what you would do to anyone who defied you. And when that fear was gone, what did you have left? Nothing. Your subject species don't fight for you because they believe in you. They fought because they were afraid. Now that they see you can be beaten, they're leaving, and there's nothing you can do to stop them. Draxthan's head bowed. It was true. Every word was true. We are offering you something different, Elena said. Not an empire built on fear, but a community built on trust. It will take time. It will not be easy. There are species who have suffered greatly under your rule. They will not forgive quickly, but we will be there to help with the transition. We will make sure that justice does not become revenge. From the viewing gallery, a single figure emerged. Vexari descended the steps slowly. She had been watching from the shadows, listening to everything. May I speak? She asked. Elena nodded. Vexari walked to the center of the chamber. She looked at her fellow council members, then at the humans. 3 months ago, I watched the Supreme Hegemon tear up your treaty. I saw the look in your eyes, Ambassador. I knew then that something was different about your species. I just didn't understand what. She turned to face Draxton directly. I have served on this council for 10 years. In that time, I have signed orders that condemned millions to slavery. I have approved military actions that destroyed entire civilizations. I did these things because I believed it was the way of the universe. The strong take, the weak serve. There is no other choice. Her voice broke slightly. I was wrong. The humans have shown us there is another choice. They had the power to destroy us utterly. Instead, they are offering us a chance to build something better. Something that will outlast any empire. She looked at the other council members. I say we take that chance, not because we deserve it, we don't, but because our children deserve a future that isn't built on blood and ashes. The chamber fell silent again. Draxton sat motionless on his throne. His eyes moved slowly across the faces of his council. These were the beings who had helped him rule an empire. They had celebrated every conquest. They had toasted every victory. They had believed, as he had believed, that they were masters of the galaxy. Now they looked old, tired, afraid. What happens if we refuse? He asked quietly. Then we leave, Elena said, and we continue until your ability to threaten anyone is completely eliminated. It might take months, it might take years, but we have time and we have patience. And afterward? Afterward, you will be left alone, defenseless, surrounded by species you have wronged for centuries. We will not protect you from their anger. You will face whatever comes on your own. Draxton thought about the rebellions already spreading through the former subject worlds. He thought about the hatred his species had earned through 3,000 years of cruelty. Without human protection, the Kelvor would be consumed. He thought about his children, his grandchildren, the future he had imagined for them. Then he thought about the future the humans were offering. Slowly, Supreme Hegemon Draxton, ruler of 200 star systems, conqueror of countless species, the most powerful being in this arm of the galaxy, stood up from his throne. He walked down the steps. He crossed the floor to where Elena stood. He stopped in front of her, looking down at the small human woman who had brought his empire to its knees. Then, for the first time in the history of the Kelvor hegemony, a supreme hegemon bowed. We accept your terms, he said, all of them. Elena did not smile. There was no triumph in her eyes, only a deep, weary relief. Then let's get to work, she said. We have a lot of rebuilding to do. 6 months had passed since the surrender in the High Council chamber. The galaxy had changed more in those 6 months than in the previous 1,000 years. On Kelvor Prime, the central plaza where human shuttles had once landed in triumph was now filled with construction equipment. Buildings that had housed military command centers were being converted into schools and hospitals. The great statues of conquering hegemons had been taken down, replaced by monuments to the species the empire had wronged. Former Ambassador Elena Vasquez, now officially the first coordinator of the Galactic Cooperative, walked through the plaza on a warm morning. She moved slowly, taking time to observe everything around her. The plaza was busy with activity. Kelvor workers carried building materials alongside members of species they had once enslaved. At first, these encounters had been tense. Old hatreds did not disappear overnight, but day by day, the tension was easing. Elena stopped at a small park that had been created where a weapons depot once stood. Children were playing there. Kelvor children and Vrethshi children and Maltharian children, all mixed together. They chased each other around a fountain, laughing and shouting, completely unaware of the history their parents carried. It is strange, isn't it? Elena turned to find Vexari standing beside her. The former council member had become one of the primary Kelvor representatives in the new cooperative. She worked harder than anyone else, as if trying to make up for her years of complicity in the old regime. What's strange? Elena asked. Watching them play together. A year ago, Kelvor children were taught that other species were inferior, tools to be used. Now they're making friends with Vrethshi cubs. Children adapt faster than adults, Elena said. They don't carry the weight of history the way we do. Is that why the humans invested so much in education programs? The schools, the cultural exchanges, the joint learning initiatives? Elena smiled slightly. Partly. We've learned that peace isn't something you can force onto people. It has to grow from understanding. And understanding starts with the youngest generation. They walked together through the plaza, two women from species that had nearly destroyed each other, now working side by side to build something new. May I ask you something personal, Vexari said. Of course. How do you do it? How do you work so closely with us, knowing what we tried to do to your people? Don't you feel anger, resentment, a desire for revenge? Elena was quiet for a moment. She watched a human aid worker helping an elderly Kelvor carry groceries across the plaza. I feel all of those things, she finally said. Every day. When I wake up, I remember the speech Draxthan gave in that council chamber. I remember how he called us property, how he laughed at the idea that we might fight back. She paused. But then I remember something else. I remember that anger, once released, is hard to control. I remember that revenge feels good in the moment, but leaves nothing but ashes. I remember all the species throughout our own history who let their justified anger turn into cycles of violence that lasted for generations. She looked at Vexari directly. The Kelvor tried to destroy us. If we had destroyed you in return, we would have won the war. But we would have lost ourselves. We would have become the thing we were fighting against. Our children would have grown up learning that the answer to violence is more violence. And eventually someone would have done to us what we did to you. Vexari nodded slowly. I think I understand. Or at least, I am beginning to. Across the plaza, a commotion drew their attention. A crowd had gathered near the temporary headquarters of the cooperative. Someone was giving a speech. They walked closer and saw that it was a Vrethsi elder. The Vrethsi had nearly been exterminated by the hegemony 2 centuries ago. Only a few thousand had survived, hiding in remote corners of the galaxy. Now they were rebuilding, their population slowly growing under the protection of the new order. The elder was speaking about forgiveness. We have every reason to hate the Kelvor, he said. His voice was thin with age but carried clearly across the crowd. They hunted us like animals. They burned our worlds. They tried to erase us from existence. The crowd was silent. Many Kelvor in attendance looked at the ground, unable to meet the elder's eyes. But hate is a chain, the elder continued. It binds us to the past. It makes us prisoners of those who hurt us. If we spend our lives hating the Kelvor, we give them power over us even now. He paused, gathering his strength. I choose to let go. Not because the Kelvor deserve forgiveness. They don't. I let go because I deserve to be free. Because my grandchildren deserve a future that isn't poisoned by my bitterness. Because the only way forward is together. When he finished, there was silence. Then slowly, someone started clapping. Others joined in. Kelvor and Vrethsi and humans and a dozen other species, all applauding together. Elena watched with tears in her eyes. This was why they had fought. This was what they had been trying to protect. Not territory, not resources. This moment, this possibility. Later that day, she visited the small residence where former Supreme Hegemon Draxton now lived. It was a modest building, nothing like the palaces he had once commanded. He had been stripped of all power and title, but the humans had insisted he be allowed to live in peace. She found him in a small garden, tending to plants. He looked up as she approached, then returned to his work. Ambassador, he said, or should I say, coordinator now. Either is fine. She sat on a bench nearby. How are you adapting? Slowly. He held up a small flowering plant. I have been learning to grow things instead of destroy them. It is harder than it looks. Everything worthwhile is. They sat in silence for a while. A human aid worker appeared with food for Draxton, a young woman who smiled and chatted with him as if he weren't the former ruler of a brutal empire. She is kind to me, Draxton said after the worker left. They all are. I don't understand it. What don't you understand? I tried to enslave her entire species. I would have killed millions of her people without a second thought. And she brings me lunch every day and asks about my garden. Elena considered her response carefully. Hatred is easy, she finally said. Any fool can hate. But humans learned long ago that hatred is a poison that destroys the one who holds it. We choose not to hate you, Draxton. Not because you deserve our kindness, but because we deserve to be free of that burden. Draxton was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. I have nightmares. Every night. I see the faces of all the species I conquered, all the people who died on my orders. I see them looking at me, asking why. He looked at Elena with eyes that had lost their glow entirely. I never used to have nightmares. When I was supreme hegemon, I slept peacefully every night. I never thought about the suffering I caused. It simply didn't matter to me. And now it matters. Now I cannot stop thinking about it. Now I understand what I was, and I am horrified. He set down the plant he had been tending. Is this what you intended? Is this my punishment? To finally see myself clearly? It wasn't intended as punishment, Elena said, but maybe it's necessary. Maybe you couldn't change until you understood what you had done. Can I change after everything? That's up to you, Draxton. We can't force anyone to become better. We can only give them the opportunity. She stood to leave. One more thing, she said. Your daughter visited the cooperative headquarters yesterday. She volunteered to work in the reconciliation program, helping Kelvor families connect with the species they wronged. Draxton looked up sharply. Shireen volunteered. Yes, she said she wants to help build something her children can be proud of. For the first time since his surrender, something like light appeared in Draxton's eyes. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Cooperative held its first official assembly. Representatives from 47 species gathered in a massive hall that had been constructed specifically for this purpose. There were no thrones, no elevated platforms. Everyone sat at the same level, equals in a new order. Admiral James Okonkwo attended as an observer. He had resigned his military commission after the war ended. The fighting was over, and he had no desire to be a soldier anymore. Now he worked with veterans from all species, helping them process the trauma of what they had experienced. He watched as Elena took the podium for the opening address. We are gathered here today to begin a new chapter in galactic history, she said. Behind us lies 3,000 years of conquest and cruelty. Behind us lies the suffering of countless species. Behind us lies the old way, where the strong took and the weak served. She paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. But we are not here to dwell on the past. We are here to build the future, a future where no single species dominates others, where strength is measured not by the ability to destroy, but by the ability to create, where the greatest power is the power to choose compassion over cruelty. She gestured to the diverse crowd around her. Look at who is in this room. Species who were enemies a year ago, species who nearly destroyed each other. Now we sit together as partners. This is what is possible when we choose to break the cycle. This is what we can become. In the audience, Vexari sat beside a Vrethshi representative. Both of them were crying. On a screen showing the address to the public, Draxton watched from his small garden. The aid worker who brought his meals stood beside him. She speaks well, the aid worker said. She always did, Draxton replied quietly, even when I was too arrogant to listen. The assembly continued for hours. Treaties were signed, committees were formed. The long, slow work of building a new civilization began. As the day ended, Elena walked through the halls of the assembly building one last time. She was exhausted but satisfied. They had taken the first steps. There would be setbacks ahead. Old hatreds would flare up. Progress would sometimes feel impossibly slow, but they had started, and that was everything. She passed a window and paused. Outside, the sky was darkening into night. Stars were beginning to appear, countless points of light representing worlds she had never seen and species she had never met. Somewhere out there, on 100 different planets, children of a dozen different species were looking up at those same stars. Kelvor and Human and Vrethshi and all the others wondering what the future would hold. For the first time in 3,000 years, that future was not written in blood. Elena smiled, turned away from the window, and went back to work. There was so much left to build.